Hello, I'm David Cohen, CEO of Fluence. Welcome to Fluence Unfiltered. Today we're going to dive into a really hot topic, federal cannabis legalization. Joining me to provide more details is Safira Galoob, Principal and CEO of the Liaison Group, the first and only Washington, D.C.-based lobbying firm focused exclusively on the cannabis industry. Safira also serves as the Executive Director of the National Cannabis Roundtable, where she advocates to advance important cannabis legislation in the U.S. Thanks for being here, Safira.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I'm so happy to have you here because, we've had a couple of other episodes where we've talked to growers and talked about growing the business, but this, I think, is a really important topic for our audience to understand, a little bit of a story, but I would be fascinated to hear how and why you got involved in this.
So, I think a lot of people have kind of unique experiences when they call coming out of their canna closet, which is the way that I discuss that. Or I actually don't know how you came out of your canna closet, so I would like to know that as well. But, in 2016, at that election period, that was when we saw the first wave. I think there were 8 new states that had passed legalization programs. And the Republicans had just garnered control of the House of Representatives. And I remember kind of so curious that there wasn't access to banking. There was so much work to do. And the fact that there was all this momentum in the states, which we all know that's been the laboratories of democracy, advancing and kind of forcing the hand of the federal government really to reconcile federal and state law, that I knew that there was an opportunity there. The Safe Banking Act, we'll talk about that, it's a piece of banking legislation, had 91 yeses when it first passed out of the House. When I started working on safe banking, we had like 10 yeses. So just to see the number of new Republicans and new Democrats who now understand the industry. Part of this, for folks in the audience, I'm presuming that even though individuals are, they may be at different places in their cannabis journey, they have decided that this industry, both from a patient access perspective and a kind of consumer products perspective and a personalized medicine and an industry opportunity, they're bought in. They know that we're into something special. The future of this plant medicine for our globe, really. Members of Congress in DC, they're a little bit slower to understand. And so a lot of it is that they don't know. And they can't get excited about or lean into or feel comfortable about an industry of which they have not yet been educated. And so it really has been an educational kind of requirement for us. And as a result, we've gotten some really great champions, former prosecutors, physicians, people who come out of finance. And so the ecosystem of our country is now represented in our champions in Congress, and that's been the change. Most folks want to understand if we involve the federal government in regulating this, one, how can we make sure we don't create the same mistake we made with opioid policy?
Right.
Because that was a mistake members of Congress have very much top of mind, particularly folks who've been in Congress who watch that policy now reveal itself to one of the biggest epidemics of our country. Secondly, folks want to understand with state programs intact, because we have 37 state programs. I realize that by the time this program is aired, it may be 39 or 40.
Yeah, right.
So I say that with a caveat, right? And 18 of those are adult consumption or recreational states. These Republicans and lawmakers want to understand if we do have this comprehensive federal framework, how does that interface with what states have set up? So there's that. There's also, how does cannabis as an economy, cannabis, as I think you even shared in prior episodes, is the fastest growing economy in the US. How do we make sure that whatever we pass as a piece of federal legislation supports that and doesn't create unintended consequences? And then finally, I think folks are very concerned and want to make sure of the federal agencies, the FDA, the TTB, Department of Agriculture, Homeland Security, all the federal agencies that make up our federal government, what is their role in the cannabis industry? And it's not entirely clear at this moment. So that's part of what's taking so long and why lawmakers are reluctant just to jump in and pass a law that doesn't seem like it fits where the industry is and where it's going.
It's a complicated soup of issues, and we talk to a lot of growers and big MSOs, mid-sized growers, and and individual users who are growing at home, and you get a lot of different views. On the one side, it's, they think we're a bunch of drug addicts and we need to make people understand that that's not the way it is. But then when you go all the way to the other side, what you just said, this has to be regulated in some form. And now I don't think people understand there's dozens of agencies inside the government that have to be able to have a say. And in turn, because of that complexity, you have a lot of politicians that are going to wait for that understanding. So while it seems like it's going very slow, I know because of the activity that we do on NCR and the things that we're tackling, it is actually moving at the speed of light. It's just that there's a long way to go. Would that be a safe way to describe all this?
I think that is, it's again, I appreciate your ability to distill it and convey it in a way for folks who are listening for the first time can really understand it. I frequently will refer to the legislation or legalization of cannabis is not a moment, it's a process.
Right.
And that's an opinion. I think it's a well-informed opinion. I think it's a very credible opinion. But there are different individuals who want, on day one, legalization happens, the barn doors open up, and it's let's just see what happens. And
right.
I think that there's enough sophisticated members of congressional decision makers as well as administration, agency, that they realize that doesn't always work for our country in the past. And so if you look at the solar industry, for example, once they opened that up, we lost an entire kind of generation of opportunities. We exported it because we didn't put the right policies in place.
Yeah. And
so I think not that the solar industry is an indication of what's going to happen, but there are lessons learned. And there are people who've been around long enough to understand that this can't just be, we pass a law, we move it on. It's a process.
On our next installment of Fluence Unfiltered, we'll dive into 2 bills that will have a huge impact on the industry if they pass. To be alerted when it goes live, be sure to subscribe to our channel. See you next time.